Hello, everyone, and welcome to Winning Work in Education and Healthcare. My name is Carl Brown. I'm the Head of Content at Assemble Media Group, and I'm chairing this discussion today, which is all about the role of MMC in revamping our school estate. The condition of the school estate is, of course, very topical with all the headlines about RAC over the past fortnight or so. And we had a great session this morning, which was more of a general discussion on upgrading our schools, and that is now available on demand. So I recommend you check that out later. But this session now is more specifically on MMC. How can it assist with challenges such as net zero? Can non-traditional approaches help plug the school's estate funding gap? And what does the sector need in order to maximise the potential of MMC? Luckily, we have a great panel to discuss all this with us today, who I'm going to introduce. So we have Martin Harvey, who's the Head of Design and Technical Services at McAvoy. We have Jonathan Parker, who's the Head of Construction at Pagaboat. And we have Simon Reed, who's the Managing Director at Lungfish Architects. Each of our panelists will speak for around 10 minutes, and that should leave us plenty of time for your questions at the end. And do feel free to ask the panel a question at any time. You can do that by using the questions box that you should be able to see on the side of your screen. And we will try and get to as many of those questions as we can at the end. But I think that's enough from me for now. So I'm now going to hand over to Martin Harvey from McAvoy for the first presentation. Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Carl. I'm just going to share my presentation at the minute. Second. Forgive me. So if you can let me know if everybody's seeing that. Okay, sorry. So just very quickly, a little bit about McAvoy. McAvoy, we are off-site manufacturing specialists of volumetric solutions. We have over 50 years experience delivering to the sectors, including health and education and commercial. We provide semi-permanent and temporary solutions, and we'll talk a little bit about those today and the reasons why it is important that it's not just one as permanent solutions. We have a long history of working with some of the clients that we met today as DFE, local authorities, schools and universities. We are predominantly based in Lisburn here outside Belfast. However, we have offices and yards in England, and we've touched on locations across UK and Ireland. So I suppose the question is, what is the role of the MMC in revamp on the school estate? And I've worded something here I've tried to highlight some key items. MMC can provide both long-term and short-term solutions. Presently, there are currently the urgent need for quality and compliance-based solutions for temporary schools. So that's obviously in relation to the RAC solution or the issues that we've had over the past, or that have been talked about over the past couple of weeks. And we can deliver those through pre-designed, tested, and pre-manufactured modules. And that's very much in line with the short-term solutions. But volumetric modular can also provide permanent solutions compliant with all the current regulations in ERs, and delivered much quicker than some other schemes. So talk a little bit about the long term. McAvoy have quite a bit of experience delivering long-term solutions, particularly for the DFE in schools. A lot of this is done in rapid timescales in terms of some of the projects that we've done is we delivered a large £20 million school in I think 66 weeks, which was just over 10 weeks ahead of schedule, and that was from where we cut the first sod until we handed the building over. We have done certain schools that we have used. We've developed the design and delivered the project to try and reduce the carbon footprint as much as possible. I'm certainly not going to say that we are net zero, but we have made large strides towards that, working with the client and the local authority to deliver that. We have significant flexibility of design, and that touches a little bit on standardization. You can see a couple of the images we have on the screen here. The Merchant Park School was the flexibility that we demonstrated here was that we delivered this school with that integrated into the local authority, which was it was highly contentious when it comes to planning, and we've delivered it in different cladding systems and stepped modules on the face of the illustration there to show that we can do different things with the same platform solution. And that brings me on then to the standardization. Just because we standardize does not mean that everybody gets the same building. And you'll notice that from the buildings here. There's high spaces and there's long span spaces. But we can use our same platform solution in a standardized way to create bespoke spaces when we talk about long-term solutions for the DFE and local authority. Mersham Park was one of those. Again, it was delivered in 57 weeks from foundations to completion. It was a state-of-the-art school of 900 pupils. It was located in the green belt, and this the low carbon aspect of that, which we worked with the DFE on. We were able to reduce the school water demand by 30%, reduction in operational energy by 73%. And I want to say it was operational energy that we focused on that one, because when we were talking about reducing carbon, it ended up being too late in the design process to talk about embodied. And we had 44% peak energy demand of the school was provided through PVs on the roof. And this school was had a significant biophilic design in it, which helped bring down the temperatures around the school. It created a much more aesthetically pleasing, healthy environment for the kids and the staff to use the school. So our short-term solutions, the short-term solutions that we're talking about here are very relevant in today's conversations with around RAC. McAvoy can provide temporary solutions like seen in the pictures here, and they can be for rental or sale. I've touched here on that they can be flexible funding solutions. This is quite a problem, and we know that there is a funding gap for RAC to be able to respond to quickly. There's a need for quick response, but through a rental or a sale, we can provide flexible funding solutions to be able to do that. So we can have short-term rental, long-term rental, rental with the end of a sale, or straight up sale, and many other options that we can work through with the client. This option that we've developed here is a standardized solution. It's called Smart Space, and we have a future-proof this project or this product because we understand the needs and the desires to be compliant with all the current building regulations, and particularly create safe spaces for our children to be taught in. And the need at the minute, or the requirement at the minute, for non-combustible insulation and outside walls, we've taken this a step further, and we have completely non-combustible walls and completely non-combustible ceilings on floors. So our product is we've tried to future-proof that, because we are building these will be in use for quite a number of years, and hopefully they will have quite a number of rental lives in them. So we've what we're going to say over-designed them to a certain extent so that they'll future-proof the needs and the ever-changing needs of our clients. And then I suppose on the short-term thing, predominantly as well, is the reuse and the recyclability and the repurposing of our modules. Particularly in our modular rental and sales side of the business, we put modules into jobs like you see here. They're in for a year, 2 years, 5 years. They can come out and they can go into other jobs. So we have case studies of that. We have case studies where we have buildings that were built so we can talk about that later, but I don't have a lot of time today. So, but the reuse, the recyclability is significantly important for modular D when we're talking about carbon footprint assessment. Some examples of the modular rental sales or the smart space, as you called there. This particular job was 5 weeks on site. It was 11 weeks from the time from contract award to handover, and that's a 52-week rental period. So it sort of talks on all the things that we mentioned earlier. It's standardized, therefore the reduction in design time and procurement of materials. The time on site to finish the building was only 5 weeks, and again, it's a short-term rental, therefore it will be reused over and over again. In response just to the RAC solution, McAvoy this is a village concept where we're suggesting that, you know, in sports pitches of schools that are affected or play areas, we can create a sort of a small village of standardized product to create, you know, to satisfy the urgent need of schools. One of the other things that we talk about is a compact solution that we have here on the right. A live project that we're talking like that is a Oasis, that a job that we're delivering at the minute. And the compact solution is sort of a multi-story version of the village concept, So we're offering those up just as examples of how we can provide short-term solutions rapidly using a standardized product. But the standardized product can create bespoke spaces, but it just needs a little bit of consideration with the DFE up front. And I think this will tie into Simon's presentation later on, where he has a different name for it than a video. So that's everything I have to say. I'm sure there'll be questions afterwards, which I'm quite happy to take. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. So I'm just going to share my piece now. Hope we can all see that. So my name is Jonathan Parker. So I'm head of construction for Pagabo. I don't know if you've heard of Pagabo at all, but we are. Oh, bear me a second. There. I hope we can all see that screen now. So Pagabo is a basic framework provider in the UK, and my role within Pagabo is head of construction. So I oversee everything that we do construction-wise, and I manage a couple of frameworks myself, these being major works and developer-led framework. And then I've got a team of other framework managers managing the projects through medium works, refit, refurb, a new M&E framework, civils and demolition as well. Under my remit, obviously, I'm looking at scoping out new frameworks and everything else that we do in what we do. So Pagabo itself, market-leading framework provider, mainly focused in the construction sector. We're the fastest growing framework provider in the UK, and we are pretty much a solution-based framework provider. So we look at giving quite unique offerings to clients, based about procurement advice, mitigating of risk through procurement on the projects and procurement itself. And then we have a suite of frameworks that we tailor make to these schemes, and we obviously bespoke that procurement process throughout. So as I said, quite unique. Ourselves, we can get involved from red line plans and budget control for clients. We can do the full procurement papers, a few OBCs, FBCs for clients. And then obviously we can also undertake the full tendering process. So we can do all the documentation set. We can help moderate it, manage the contractor longer term, and obviously look at the social value aspect as well. So it's quite unique in the market. Of which, in the last few years, we've done £4.8 billion worth of construction, which has been procured or currently on site. And obviously with that, we're very heavily involved in the social value aspect, of which we've done about 5.6 billion in social value over the last few years. Where we come from, a little bit in the market, we're providing not just a procurement portal, we're not that, we're more of a consultancy service, but we're very heavily in providing benefits for our supply chain in the market, of which is Loop, which is our social value software, which is a basic market leading software solution that we give free use of to all our supply chain partners for bids and delivering schemes and monitoring and tracking their social value. And we're very much involved in instigating the social value returns before we start the procurement advice. So we get into the detail of how to maximise that potential for clients. So when we're looking at regeneration schemes, it's really important looking at that aspect before. We're on the net zero journey. We are launching our own decarbonisation framework to market very shortly. So yeah, we're within that itself. So like Martin, I've obviously got a bit of MMC experience for basically volumetric side of things from a few years ago, before I've been at Pagabo 6 years now. So I got involved in full life cycle involvement with the MM scheme. So some of at the back in the day, some of the largest in the UK from my previous employments, but I was looking at the full turnkey solution. So I was involved in the bid stage, the design fundamentals, the risk management of the scheme, manufacturing, and obviously delivery as well. So it's quite unique elements that I've done. So I'm fully aware of all the benefits of that sector. Some of the challenges as well, and things that are a bigger piece that we may come on to in discussion as well, that need to be overcome to really drive that forward of what we do. So we know modern methods in construction, the 7 categories. of which, as Martin alluded to, obviously the main one that everyone knows of, MMC, is volumetric, be it steel, be it timber, which is obviously 3D prefab units. There's lots of other categories within there, within the government classification of modern methods of construction, but a lot of the time where obviously Simon comes onto these are factored into the design of these of the buildings themselves, and usually utilised on a regular basis by contractors. So SIPS panels, things like that, are deemed as pretty much standard build with the industry now, but obviously MMC kind of lends itself towards the volumetric and off-site side of things. So first couple of benefits of the MMC, I don't know if I'm to my slide there, but speed of install, as Martin said, speed is very, very, very key within that element of. Simon, obviously, who looks at the design aspect of things, is going to come off a bit about the design freeze and things in a little while, but one of the benefits of MMC is speed of install, especially the education sector, and it lends itself very, very well to the summer works. All off-site providers always have a peak in what they do over the summer works when they're working on that time scale, which is also one of the challenges in the industry as well. Come on to quality of manufacture. Obviously, in a factory environment, the quality is there. It's the speed, standardization of supply, which is also extremely important. You get economies of scale, not just on purchasing as well, but often manufacture as well, and that side of things. Benefits, obviously, health and safety. If you're working in a factory, it's a clean environment, and you're looking at things like Six Sigma, Lean, where you're really looking at the health and safety and maximising the working hours. But it does benefit quite heavily, health and safety-wise, versus work carried out on site. So, your riddles a hell of a lot less with MMC as well. Innovation is quite key as well, because you're looking at standardisation as the supply, and potentially on design. You can bring a lot more innovation into schemes where you can bring them in very early on, start incorporating them into design of projects rather than the specification dictating the design. You can specify it at the onset and factor these into it as well. So it does lend itself to that as well. Forward purchase of materials. So we're in the current market when materials are going haywire and steadied a little bit currently, but the manufacture and sector and materials is quite key. Through a bit of a lead in on modern methods, you need design freeze quite early on in the process. You can get materials purchased, but if you're utilising standard, basically volumetric shapes and sizes, you can forward purchase a lot of the steel work, a lot of the timber required to relieve those market pressures of peaks in supply. So it does mean that you can stockpile a little bit, not great, but also it means that you've got that standardization and relieving market pressures and cost fluctuations as well. Some of the issues for MMC to consider longer term, because obviously the MMC providers are based in one location. Martin's coming from a quite unique standpoint with McAvoy's, which is a very large player in the industry. They'll have quite a robust supply chain nationally and for groundworks and such. A lot of the MMC providers are quite regionally based and probably don't cover nationally. So because of which, if they're moving outside of their geographical areas, their supply chain is going to be limited, and of which their obviously capability of delivering those works is reduced, and you probably don't get economies of scale or even value for money undertaking those packages as well. There is an element in the industry of capability, skill set as a main contractor because of the previous comment about the groundworks. It means that it's very difficult for an MMC provider to start moving into more geographical regions that they're not really quite established in. And of that, it gives their growth potential, limits that to quite a slow and steady sort of growth rather than a quite a fast pace that you might see into a normal main contractor selection. From a public sector standpoint, which obviously I live in on a daily basis, the public sector has a number of different hurdles to go through. Governance and financial standing is one of them. So when a council may be looking at an MMC provider, one area they'll be looking at is that financial strength of that provider. And you've probably seen in recent press, obviously Caledonian going under, and also where we're based up in East Yorkshire, a smaller provider called Eco Modular going under. The financial strength of some of the providers, MMC providers, is limited. So of which it's very difficult for a public sector body to engage in contract direct, especially on big secondary schools, which is really where, you know, a lot of these providers wanted to get to. So of which they have to utilise a main contractor, a traditional main contractor for the balance sheet to have that financial strength, and then that MMC provider to be created as a subcontractor. The problem with that within the industry means that the MMC provider doesn't get a direct route to clients. So ultimately, they don't get that potential of pipeline of works through the sector to be able to upskill and provide, you know, greater capacity of what they do. There's far too much in the industry of having peaks and troughs in manufacturing, dependent upon that need that's been passed through the main contractor side. So there's a number of DFE approved frameworks for education out there, but they still don't offer a long-term relationship with a client to give the pipeline procurement. So the MMC providers don't get a long-standing pipeline where they're securing work for this year, maybe some next year, but they don't have 2-3 years down the line like a main contract traditionally would. So that's one of the issues that needs to be looked at longer term to allow a further development into the MMC sector. The education sector is quite established. There's other sectors like, you know, the housing sector, which needs to be worked on as well and addressed accordingly. As I mentioned about the peaks and troughs of the pipeline, it works summer pressures. And if you're upskilling and improving the MMC manufacturer for the summer months, you then got to stand down a lot of the trades and workers for the quieter months. So it doesn't give a full continuity of growth. It's a very peaks and troughs scenario. And all you need is a MMC providers to have a few schemes that don't go well under a fixed price contract with the main contractor, and it, you know, it does cause financial stresses for clients. So that's my little sector. I'll Sam.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was a really great run through there of some of the benefits of MMC from a public procurement perspective, including speed of installation, quality, standardisation, health and safety, innovation, and a lot more. And he also spoke about some of the potential barriers as well, including the financial strength of some MMC providers. I must apologise. I did mean to thank Martin after Martin's presentation as well, and he also talked about some of the same benefits, but he also talked about regulatory compliance and the importance of temporary and semi-permanent solutions as well as longer-term solutions. Now I'm going to move on to our third and final speaker, who is Simon Reed, the Managing Director at Lungfish Architects. Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carl, and thank you, those two talking before. Hopefully I can segue nicely into that and give everyone some visual bombardment of some of the schemes that we've been developing over the last few years. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Make that full screen. Okay, so yeah, we're Lungfish Architects are very much coming from a designer's perspective with MMC. We're all aware of the typology of what a modular building can provide, and hopefully I can demonstrate a direction of travel on how we are revamping the education sector. It's very much a dominant sector of ours, and here's just some of the stats that we've actually pushed boundaries as hard as we can as architects to deliver projects. So as a practice, we're now 7 years old, and some of those stats are testament to the fact that MMC has allowed us to reach concept to completion numerous occasions on repeat portfolios of work with clients. And standardization we seem to thrive in, but we do find the good, the bad and the ugly of MMC. So we now have that confidence to say, yes, this should go an MMC route, or actually the same amount of confidence, no, we should not, and these are the reasons why. And that very much comes from a public sector funding perspective of not allowing our clients and decision makers to spend money needlessly. That takes it away from the buildings that we want to create and then move on to the next project. So this picture, whilst it's just showing the roof of a school with some housing around, it's actually a very important image to us as a business, because it actually becomes a time capsule of decision makers and stakeholders, everyone from the general public to those holding the funding and where that funding has come from. So whether it's private developers with 106 contributions obliged to build a school, local authorities, desperately created school places, and then obviously the local community and how schools should be seen as a community asset and should actually be now the village centre of these new housing developments. And this is very typical of what we're seeing now. And MMC has got a huge role to play in making sure this is the best possible village centre for our local communities. So I'm just going to show you some examples of projects through an iterative process where we've got a very strong platform now of pre-designed elements. We do use a very strong 80-20 rule where 80% of the build is completely standardised, even to the point where we've got building control approval on the actual technology of the scheme. And it allows us as architects to then work with the planners, work with the local community in consultation and providing attractive buildings for the education estate. This one is of massive importance to us. It was unfortunately subject to an arson attack during the pandemic. So this was designed against an insurance write-off. So every single penny was accounted for. And architects do get bad press because we do specify materials. We go in for planning with ambiguous notes that say cladding colour to be confirmed, cladding arrangement to be confirmed. But what MMC brings us, because it does fast track certainty and confidence, we were able to select the actual materials from the shopping list, from the likes of McAvoy and their supply chain of what we're allowed to use. So we work with that. Why would we work with anything else? So the planning application through our modelling of information now, digital age that we're in, we're able to specify buildings even before planning and give that client that certainty. And this is a scheme that was a real testament to that. Another example, and looking at the attractive hall there, using MMC to create modular halls. Now that wasn't, it was often a hybrid portal steel frame, but now we're doing modular halls. The windows are an illusion. They're not an expensive deep reveal. But again, we were able to use that shopping list to create an attractive frontage that faces a public square with local businesses. And behind this is the 80% of standardised classrooms, which are modelled in compliance with the DFE. And again, another example of schools where we are literally seeing buildings around 40 to 50 modules for a primary school facility being delivered in 1 week. And that's phenomenal for a housing estate or local communities to see serious impact on the education sector. And this is actually a very valid route of construction. Now, all three of the schools that I've just shown were actually submitted for planning within 4 to 6 weeks. And everyone jumps off there to, well, how the hell did you do that? And we've been able to change the strategic decision-making of our local authorities and developers by getting everyone around the table from the first meeting. We're all aware of the planning crisis at the moment with shortage of staff, but also the length of time planning applications are taking. But when we preload the data for an MMC school, like what we've done, we're actually able to do a planning pre-application meeting. Instead of it being 5 to 8 weeks long, we're doing it in one afternoon. And we've even got the crane driver there because we can actually get the actual facts and certainty down on paper, reach that design freeze. The planning department, highways team, Sport England, Environment Agency all know what they're going to expect. And we can give certainty on cost and value to that client. So where next with MMC? As education designers, we've looked at forest school design. It does actually link really well and echoes with Martin's village concept of standardized pavilions using one Revit or one digital model that can be replicated. It's excellent for expansion projects where a one form entry expands to a 2 or a 3 and even additional nurseries. So again, community buildings using MMC, we do see that as a pathway to success. Just to prove that concept of completion, that visual does exist. And latterly, we're looking at a national model for forest schools for private developers to build schools themselves instead of handing that money back to the local authority. Use the MMC technology to build schools out, become that village centre, and create value for the housing developments around and those folk that live there. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. That was excellent, and it was great to hear some real-life examples there of MMC in action when it comes to the school's estate. Could I now ask the panel to turn their cameras back on, because we've got quite a long time now for questions, which is great, because I'm not sure where to start, really. There's quite a lot to talk about. I think to begin with, I'd like to just go to an audience question that came in a short while ago, which is about standardisation. So the question for the panel is, in terms of standardisation, how do you ensure you are hitting particular clients' key project aims? You'd imagine that the requirements would vary from school to school. So how do you benefit from standardisation while still giving the client what they want?
I can jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing we like to do as designers is get the data up front and lock down so we can reach that freeze. So everything from the MBS to room data sheets. Once we know the physical environment that building needs, how that building will perform, we can lock the mechanical, electrical design, the environmental design, the structural design, bake that into the specification, and then we know the kit of parts that we're working with. And what we found, standardization, it's often a dull term, or it stifles creativity. But actually, if we fast track that up front, tell the client what they're actually getting for their money, in one meeting, the next meeting, we're talking about furniture and interior design, or what we often forget about in the education estate is landscape. And that's where the forest schools, learning outdoors and that nurturing environment, how can we do that if we're just focusing on the length of the corridor or how we're getting the M&E past the roof lights, for example? So we see that data-rich approach using standardization massively advantageous for clients to make bigger and better decisions.
Okay, Martin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose just from our point, it's as much about standardization of the kit of parts or the components that was just mentioned there. We're not here to say that that we standardize exactly the room or the school for everybody. It's what makes up that. It's what makes up the internals of the walls, what makes up the floor construction. Some of the spatial sizes, but mostly it's around the components that we can use over and over again to build up bespoke spaces. And if we can get that standardization around that and standardize the requirements, then we can do the testing earlier, we can do the design earlier, and we can hold stock of those components. And that's the standardization that we see, not the actual space or the school. It's the components that make up the space of the school.
Okay, Jonathan, do you want to add anything before we move on?
I think where on the standardization of where issues arise, I think Martin and Simon are both fully aware that there's a lot of stigma about modern methods, and you start looking at housing, but in the school sector, they think that you can only have it in a certain shape, a certain size, and it's really not. There's lots of different ways to manufacture in the MMC, be it by jigs or standing down individually, but you can design however you want to do it. I've done basically a visitor centre at Spurn Point, which was a half moon shape. You can design anything you want. It just takes the planning aspect into it. So, standardization, as Simon said, is locking down as much as you can and sticking to, as much as you can of the standard modular shapes and how it's orientated, how it's all fit together. But what you put within those modules is freedom of choice. All it is utilizing as a structure that's manufactured off-site that's then brought to site and put together, rather than designing and building a structure on site and then having to build it with all the wet trades and everything else in a really hostile environment. So it doesn't change anything that you're looking to do design wise. It just means that you've got certain parameters that we need to address up front. So, more aspects can be done. You can design offsite buildings. Anything within marble floors in so much. You can do a full operating theatre for the healthcare, and you can do it offsite. There's lots of things you can do. It's just the parameters that the standardisation has their stigma to, which doesn't have to be that case. A lot of the standardisation is how that Martin and Simon were looking at. It's all about the orientation of how that building is not looks or performs, but how it's put together design wise.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to move things on now and talk about. So I suppose it's inevitable. It's the elephant in the room, really, with the headlines in recent weeks about RAC, and we've had a couple of questions about RAC. We've had a question from somebody who wants to know whether the speed of these approaches means that MMC solutions, MMC could be the solution to the RAC crisis, where you need to build alternative classrooms or whatever it is quickly. And then we've had another question from somebody saying, isn't RAC an example of MMC? It's modular and manufactured off-site. So I suppose really that with that second one, I think it's more about, is there anything from, it's decades old, isn't it? But is there anything from that crisis that can be a learning for MMC and schools? So there's two questions there, really. It's potential of MMC to help solve the RAC crisis, and whether there's any learning from the fact that in Roland Finch's opinion, RAC is an example of MMC. I don't know who wants to tackle that first.
I'll go for that if I can. First of all, yes, MMC certainly can help with the RAC solution. But we can, and I think I demonstrated in my presentation that some of the solutions that we can bring to the table for delivering short-term solutions with a view then that we could end up with long-term solutions. So I absolutely think that MMC can solve some of that. With regards to the learning out of RAC, I'm going to say I think I'm young enough to not have a huge input into when RAC was about. However, what I can say is that the materials that we are using and the components that we are using in our modular solutions are no different or very little different than the components and the materials that we're using in a traditional setting. So it's the same sort of testing, it's the same data sheets that we're using. We just put it together in a slightly different way. In terms of learning from it, I think one of the things that we can bring in today's modular solutions is that we can do our testing now to the very latest standards, BSEN standards and whatnot, in terms of fire, structure, and racking test, thermal, and we have done that on some of our standard solutions. So I think what we're saying is it's not just bringing in new materials or putting materials together in a new way and not knowing how they perform. We have the ability to test them up front and prove that they do perform, and they do perform to factors of safety which are significantly greater than hopefully they'll ever experience, particularly in fire scenarios. So I think that opportunity to test is, and we've done a lot of that in the past couple of years, is key to proving that modular can work, whereas maybe RAC didn't. However, I would say that the drive towards standardized components, working with clients and trying to understand exactly what they want, allows us then to go and test that, and we can do that up front.
Jonathan, or do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think, as Martin said, it's the components the same. So RAC is the concrete that's using traditional, maybe using modular. There's always going to be in components and in manufacture and traditional build that are going to come through and have issues that the construction industry has to look at. It's how things perform over the longer term. But as Martin said, it's the testing aspect, and if you can do that testing in a controlled environment and start looking at different ways, you can test before you even get to site. You can test early on. You can do this work up front to help it. And with providing a solution, there's going to be an awful lot of schools that are going to have to be taken down or adapted or however it's going to be done. But there's the quick turnaround in the MMC world that can help support that, or it's on a temporary basis as well, which is the MMC. So it offers the best of both worlds, to be perfectly honest. So it is a an assistance process through.
Okay, Simon, is there any thoughts from you?
Yes, certainly. So just to echo the two gents, multiple building owners, academy trusts, local authorities with lots of education assets. MMC is one of the only solutions of relocatable buildings. So if we can phase in a village that Martin's product contains, it can be deployed across an education estate from one school to the next. And I see that diagram being one of the routes to a solution. And then I believe, obviously, RAC as a component material, we're in the reactive phase now. It's too late. What MMC allows us to do is be proactive with those materials. If, for example, we look at a dial from 0 to 10, 0 being base building control compliant and 10 being passive house, and all of those warranties of materials, the DFE, we talk about life expectancy a lot. So that's a very proactive approach of having warranted materials on a building, pre-approved, tested before it's delivered to site. It's the closest thing to buying a product from a retailer in terms of technology. A warranted building, that's what we're talking about. So that knowledge and certainly BIM and digital information is key for the post-occupancy care of that building and knowing when that material needs replacing.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I'm going to go to quite a specific question, but I think there's a much broader question behind it as well. So Paul Statusfield has asked, and I don't know the answer to this, but he's saying, am I correct in saying we, I think he means the public sector, are limited to 30% of turnover, can not exceed the project value? This limits opportunity. So he's basically saying sort of public sector rules are kind of limiting the opportunity for MMC. I don't know whether anyone wants to talk about that specific issue, but more broadly, is there anything that is holding back the adoption of MMC in terms of rules around procurement or public sector regulations or anything like that?
Do you want me to have a stab at this one first, being in the procurement world?
I was on you, Jonathan.
So different authorities will have different standing orders for different governance. So yes, in one world, the percentage of turnover of what you can look at MMC providers, there's areas in local authorities that will say you can, got certain swimming lanes you have to stick within, but there are literally issues in it which you don't have as a main contractor who have a high turnover, like a tier one, put it that way. But as a framework provider and an industry, what we need to address is you don't want to overburden any MMC provider on a scheme that may be 50% value of their turnover, because ultimately it's putting them under undue pressure financially if anything overruns on project cost. So where in the industry we need to get to is a pipeline needs to be presented not just across by potential contractors or by individual local authorities. There is an area that I'm trying to look at, framework wise with our competitors, or even central body government and local authorities, is knowing what's coming down the track and how they're procuring it. Ultimately, every single local authority knows what they've got in 3, 4, 5 years' times in education sector, what they need to procure. Likewise, potentially with health, subject to funding. There is no reason why in the industry that we can't all get around the table, know where the overall potential pipeline is coming from, and then start looking at how that's going to be procured. Because ultimately, each individual local authority will have their requirements of what school they've got. Likewise, it's a bit like in a main contractor world, where the supply is the funnel, is the actual issue out there, because there's only so much supply chain and to deliver it. And then ultimately, then you're cherry picking who's doing what. If a pipeline is produced over the coming years, it allows Martin and other providers to start looking and generating that supply. It allows Simon to get involved in schemes early on to help with basically the design, feeding into the manufacturer. So things are procured way in advance of where they need to be. So local authorities can actually get ahead of the curve looking at things 2 years down the line, as opposed to we've got something in 9 months and everything's reactive rather than proactive. That way the industry allows to get a pipeline moving forward. It builds up those MMC providers' balance sheets because they have continuous supply. They can have more financial standing, which releases the burden on the public sector at the back end. It's just very much having an open book, transparent approach on what's coming through. I'm having conversations.
To what extent is that happening then, Jonathan, at the moment? Have we got a long way to go on that?
A long way to go. A lot is from different funding pots. Different local authorities work differently. Some are more open and looking at pipelines. What we try and do is with a client is to get into those conversations. We help with master plan and we help in procurement, 2-3 years down the road. I'm more in, moving into the development world where we're looking at large regen schemes through the developer framework. But it's having that open, honest discussion so you can get things done in advance rather than being reactive. All local authorities are really feeling the pinch on revenue and income, but they're also feeling the pinch on their resource. So, they've only got a finite of resource and they're trying to do an awful lot and shoehorn things through. So, where we kind of come into it is trying to provide that extra support mechanism to get that transparency and start looking at the future rather than being reactive. So, as an industry, by different sectors, there is no reason why it shouldn't be a lot more transparency coming through. I've tried to open that conversation with a number of different framework providers over the years to try and get not what they're looking at or local authorities, but go as an entity and say, look, this is what we should do longer term. It has benefits, supply chain, MMC providers, traditional contractors. It just breaks down the barrier and you're doing things more in advance, which creates that extra value for money statement as well. So it has benefits all around. It just means you're just opening that book early. Okay.
Martin, I would imagine you'd agree with that.
100%, and a lot more along with it. Just some of the things that Jonathan's saying, look into the future and being less reactive. Absolutely. Open and honest conversations to try and, from us as a contractor to see visibility of pipeline and to some extent try and get surety of pipeline. If we see the pipeline coming down the line and have surety of the pipeline, we will invest in developing the product further. We will do more testing. We will actually, we can provide or develop standard platforms that for clients and that's back to the standard components that I'm talking about that can be put together to create bespoke spaces. One of that, we've done that with seismic and working with our competitors. Again, that's what we've done with seismic. So to answer the question slightly different earlier about the 30%, we as a contractor don't want any more than 30% really from any one person, or any one client, because we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So what we can do is if we work with our competitors and they, and we're quite open to the scenario of them doing a portion of the building and us doing a portion of the building and using the same platform to deliver, perfect. That suits everybody and it de-risks it for everybody. But it's back to that pipeline. If we could get visibility of it, surety of it, then we can develop everything further. We can test more. We can VE more. If we can do the testing and bring all this, the sizes down and the materials down and value engineered, it doesn't just have to be value engineered for McAvoy. We can pass that back to the clients again. But that's only if we get visibility of pipeline and some degree of surety on it.
What do you think are the barriers to that visibility of pipeline?
Well, I can totally understand from a client's point of view that maybe talking too openly maybe with contractors about the pipeline, but equally I think that is the solution. I think the surety of work, we all have to go through planning, we have to go through all the statutory bodies. That's why I really liked Simon's discussion there on bringing all the planners into the room at the very start, one people and getting it through that system quickly. We have jobs at the minute taking months and months to get through planning and all with genuine reasons. But I think if everybody's on the one, working together to get it over that one hurdle and get it through that pre-con phase quickly and get it through using a standardized approach, standardized components, not standardized spaces. I have to say that over and over again. Standardized components, then I think that'll get over the barriers.
Simon, is there anything you want to say on this?
I think the examples that I showed there perhaps were part of a eureka moment where the client, the local authority, the funding decision makers, the commissioners, they got MMC, they understood it, they were convinced. Nothing better than kicking the tires of building a scheme and taking a new client to it, and then they get it. The route to success is multiple pre-con projects all at the same time, with all of that learning done, built in. Why aren't we submitting half a dozen schools all at once into that same planning department, and that planning department are prepared for it? They know what they're going to get, they understand what they're going to get, and they can intensify that process and not let the education sector fall foul of these long delays. But all of the main manufacturers out there now acting as tier ones, they need that supply, and they've got the capacity, but we shouldn't just treat each one as its own pilot scheme. We need multiple schemes, and everyone's going to benefit.
Multiple schemes, and presumably just, I mean, we've had a question about this, but I think this ties into some of the stuff we've just been talking about. But somebody's asked whether the MMC approach or approaches require much earlier client engagement, and I think that's the case, isn't it? I think that's
we've had that for perhaps the last 20 years, where clients have sat around a table with multiple consultants and decision makers, from project managers, the cost team, to you name it, and we baffle the client by talking about the thermal heat capacity of this material that's on this particular space, or the where the services are coming from and how much that's going to cost. And what we've found with MMC is we have to give confidence, put that to one side. We've taken care of all of that as an industry. Now we're going to talk about what furniture you need, or what's going to happen, how many electric parking points the council needs, and what's that going to do for the benefit of the future of this facility, community involvement, all that added value. It does create room for that compared to a traditional approach.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about the sort of perception of MMC. There's obviously been there's been a number of high-profile failures in the MMC space over the last year or so, including Caledonian Modular, of course. And there was headlines a few weeks ago because of schools closing because of what the DFE described as poor workmanship by Caledonian Modular. All of that together, is there any sense that maybe confidence in MMC has been affected by some of those headlines in recent weeks and months, or is that not the case? I just wonder whether there's any concerns been raised on the ground. That's for whoever wants it.
Well, I suppose I'll take it because Caledonian was mentioned. Who at one point would have been a competitor of ours. It hasn't been raised that much to us, to be honest. And I don't know the specifics. I'm not going to go into specifics of what did go wrong, but the bits and pieces that we hear going wrong of designs and calculations and that, I think most of the clients, or any of the clients that we've been working on, have the comfort of knowing that we are using independent consultants. We are independently testing our products. We have peer reviews on all of our work. So I suppose I haven't felt that yet, if it's coming, but certainly I believe that we have answers for them should anybody ask those questions. But it is a big news story. It is a big failure, and it's unfortunate. But as a contractor who is in that field, no, I haven't actually directly been impacted on that just yet.
Simon or Jonathan, do either of you want to come in on that one?
Like I said earlier, we've had the good, the bad, and the ugly of MMC, with companies going under halfway through a design, or the client likes what's been completed and then can't get another one because that the stability of that company. Again, it's pipeline generated that suits MMC, multiple buildings, multiple orders, all at once. And I think from a perception point of view, we're finally getting there with that household perception of modular and what that means. And we need to demonstrate it more. We need to kick those tires more.
Yeah, perception of MMCs and modular is different in different sectors. I don't think it's got much of a stigma attached to it in the education sector. No. If you look at a lot of the schools out there, especially if there's extension blocks, things like that, the chances are it's been done modular rather than traditional builds because of the timescales required. I don't think it has massive stigma. I think other sectors like housing has got more of a stigma to it than schools itself. You're speaking to local authorities and multi-academy trusts and head teachers. A lot of the schemes that we've done, large secondary schools, have a large element of volumetric within that, or fully volumetric. So a lot of them see the benefits, they see the speed, they see the continuous supply and everything else. I don't think it's the stigma in the education sector. I think it's more of a stigma in the housing rather than anywhere else.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to squeeze a specific question in about the speed. I think most of you mentioned the speed as one of the benefits of MMC. We've got a question from someone who wants to know how significantly are overall project timelines reduced. It's while time on site comes down, does the project timelines just move forward, or is the overall timeline actually reduced? I don't know whether there's a quick way. We've only got a few minutes left, but I don't know whether there's a quick way of answering that question to illustrate the benefit in terms of speed. You're on mute.
Sorry, I can give you some statistics on that because we have done quite a bit of work on that. I'm not going to say how much quicker it is than traditional, because we have some traditional contractors out there who are very good, very fast, very efficient. But what I can say is that we've done our study on a development on our standardized platform. And if we were to use a standardized platform using standardized components to create those bespoke spaces and have the testing done earlier and have the product in stock, we can reduce 33%. And that was based on a live scheme, 16 weeks on a 49-week program. We can reduce that project by, and that's not by massive improvements on how it's going to be built or how much quicker it's going to get to site or how much quicker the building's going to get built. It's actually, it takes out just a couple of real key things. One, if we have standardized components on the platform, you're taking out a huge chunk of design time. And if we can keep those products in stock, then your procurement time, so the times really that the end client know nothing about or don't see whenever it's on site, as in us buying the materials, waiting those materials coming to our yard to get in, that is where the big savings are. So design and procurement with some efficiencies in the factory, and that brought us on a particular job, so 33%, 32.6% exactly, saving on time on a standard McAvoy bespoke job. So that's the standardization is key to reducing program.
Okay, Simon, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, 30% was our answer to that question. Because we can reach a design freeze much quicker, we can get it in for planning much quicker, but it does require that collaboration and no stigma or perception around it's cheaper or quicker. It's, look, this is serious and we can achieve this. We've done a lot of rescue mission projects from schools that have been designed traditionally and then becoming too expensive and the program takes too long to build. Clients have learned from that, and we've now gone in with standardized solutions or iterations of a previous design. And we've even gone as far as landing the school a year ahead of the housing developers program. So they're selling the houses on the back of having a school as the emblem infrastructure of that housing estate, as opposed to a housing development being built and the developers screaming at the local authority saying we need a school, because it's a big red line boundary with nothing in it. So yeah, we've been through all of those scenarios, but yeah, a third is a safe bet.
Jonathan, just really quickly, would you agree with those estimates?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the more upfront, when someone gets a contract, you've got in the contract, you've got a large mobilisation in design, you've got a pre-con, you're bringing the team in together. Where the MMC providers have a benefit with Simon and Martin working hand in hand is that you've got those communication lines already set up. So they hit the ground running. They're not looking at the structure of a building and how that's going to be put together. That can be done very quickly, looking at the orientation of the design of the building, what's required, and how that's all going to be managed. So you get further down the road quicker, and then you design freeze, and then you start moving into manufacture and stuff. So it does have a massive plus, and you can move very, very quick depending on the design of the build.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I think that's about all we've got time for, unfortunately. But I thought that was a fascinating discussion, all about the benefits of MMC in the school estate and some of the challenges and solutions there to improve it as well. So thank you very much to all our panelists. This session will be available to watch again, or if you miss some of it, you can watch it on demand. I think it normally takes about half an hour or so for that to go up after the session. Tomorrow, our attention turns to healthcare, and we will have two more debates on the healthcare issues. But that's all from me, I think. So thank you again to Martin, Jonathan, and Simon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.